Today, I'm going to be telling you 3 true crime stories linked by a single theme. All of these cases have videos or images associated with them that are particularly haunting or which have unsettling context behind them. As always, my name is Nigel. I run this channel with my good friend Luke, and welcome back to Crime Zone. A reminder, if you do find today's video interesting and informative, be sure to like and subscribe for more true crime stories told with a mysterious and suspenseful vibe. Also, if you're particularly into cases like these, we've included links to other similar videos we've done before in the description below, so definitely check those out next. With that out of the way, let's dive in. The footage on screen right now was recorded in the summer of 2024. As you can see, a group of teens are riding around in a car together. They're laughing, singing, dancing, and appear to be in an overall celebratory mood. Don't let the smiles fool you though, because while these teens definitely were celebrating something, it wasn't simply a fun day out with friends. You see, shortly before this was recorded, this group had been involved in something incredibly shocking, something that they believed they'd gotten away with. That was until their own video ended up exposing what they'd done. In order to understand how, though, first, we have to rewind a bit. At approximately 5:25 a.m. on August 10th, 2024, the London Metropolitan Police received an urgent call from workers at King's Cross Station. King's Cross is one of the city's major railway hubs, one that you might recognize if you're a fan of the Harry Potter films. However, there was nothing magical about what was going on there that morning. Police had been called after several people had spotted a man stumbling around near the station's main concourse building. He had serious injuries to his face, and blood was dripping from his head. The man's name was Anthony Marks, a 51-year-old homeless man who was from the area. When officers arrived, he was in very rough shape, but he was able to tell them a little bit about what had happened to him. Anthony admitted that morning he'd agreed to see a local dealer who he'd previously purchased drugs from. The dealer, who he knew only by the name Ghost, had asked to speak with him about something. However, what he didn't realize was that he was walking into an ambush. When they met outside McGlynn's pub around 5 a.m., Anthony explained that Ghost was with 2 young women. They claimed one of the girls had recently been robbed while selling crack cocaine, and they not only believed that Anthony knew the people responsible, they wanted answers. Anthony said he had no idea what they were talking about and pleaded that this had nothing to do with him, but it didn't matter. Within moments, he'd been chased down, surrounded, and beaten in the middle of the street. The attack finally ended when a member of the public overheard what was happening and chased the group off with a cricket bat. But even then, Anthony was in a desperate situation. He'd stumbled his way to King's Cross because it was the first place that he thought he might be able to get some help. After speaking to police, Anthony was rushed to a local hospital, but sadly, the situation was worse than even he realized. While he survived the initial attack, the injuries he'd suffered to his head were extremely severe, and he ended up dying from them almost exactly a month later, on September 14th. As you might imagine, this left investigators in a difficult spot. They still hadn't yet located the people responsible for the awful crime, and now their victim and primary witness was gone. What police had uncovered by this point only made things more unsettling. CCTV footage taken at the scene revealed just how brutal Anthony's murder really was. The video showed that Anthony had been chased down by the 3 attackers, who were armed with what appeared to be parts from the hood and bumper of a car. After hitting him with these and knocking him to the ground, the group proceeded to kick, stomp on him, and repeatedly strike him in the head with a glass liquor bottle. As if that weren't horrifying enough, audio picked up by the cameras captured the perpetrators yelling, quote, "Hit him again. Kick. Do it again. Have you learned your lesson yet?" So yeah, the footage was unbelievably chilling, but fortunately it also proved to be quite valuable. Using it, as well as other video from CCTV cameras in the area, Metropolitan Police were able to track the suspects' movements and eventually located all 3 of them. They were subsequently identified as 16-year-old J.D. Bingham, 16-year-old Emilia Lee Bradshaw McCoy, and 17-year-old Mia Campos George. As investigators soon learned, J.D. was the person that Anthony knew as Ghost. They also discovered that he, Emilia, and Mia had all recently started working for a local drug trafficking organization. Even more shocking than the ages of the young killers, though, was what police found on their cell phones. It turned out that they had no remorse for what they'd done to Anthony. In fact, they were bragging about the crime. In a message posted to one of the teen girls' Snapchat accounts, they wrote, quote, "Loyalty will never be questioned. It's really no joke. We get in these fields together. Bro, if one swings, the other swings. No violation is ever taken lightly." Despite what this message would seem to suggest, the teens very much did seem to view the whole thing as a joke, though. In one text exchange after the attack, they sent each other memes and laughed about the idea of going to prison. The girls, especially, had taken extensive photos and video selfies both before and after the crime, some of which placed them at the scene of the murder. But perhaps the most twisted of these was the one I showed you at the beginning of this story. This video was filmed inside the group's stolen getaway car, not long after the fatal attack on Anthony Marks. They were singing and dancing and celebrating the fact that they'd supposedly gotten revenge for that earlier robbery. They also believed they'd gotten away with murder. Following these revelations, JD was arrested in early October of 2024, followed by Emilia and Mia about 2 months later. When the case went to trial in late 2025, JD was convicted of murder, as it was determined that he was the one who likely caused Anthony's fatal injuries by hitting him in the head with the liquor bottle. Emilia and Mia, though, were convicted of the lesser offense of manslaughter. On January 5th, 2026, J.D. Bingham was sentenced to a minimum of 16 years in prison. Emilia Lee Bradshaw McCoy was sentenced to 3 years, 11 months, while Mia Campos George received 3 years and 6 months. Speaking after the sentencing, the lead detective on the investigation, Inspector Jim Barry, summed up the case this way. Quote, "This is a particularly callous murder that gives an insight into the ruthless brutality of County Lines gangs. The ages of Bingham, Bradshaw McCoy, and Campos George are particularly shocking, but the fact that they were teenagers does not excuse their violent actions as part of a drug line that has brought fear and intimidation to London's streets." Detective Barry also went on to address the dark irony in how the three killers were caught, stating, quote, "They believed they had escaped justice, even posing for selfies together and laughing about what they had done. There was a sense of justice that officers were able to use these to place them at the scene of the crime." There's one other layer of tragedy to this case that I want to mention, and it has to do with Anthony's situation at the time of his death. I mentioned before that he was homeless, but it also seems that he was very much alone in the world as well. According to reports, no family members or next of kin showed up at the trial or sentencing, and we couldn't really find anything published that was actually about him and not the crime. Of course, this is extremely sad, but the fact that there was no one to advocate for him may have also had very real consequences. You see, when Anthony was taken to the hospital after the attack, police discovered that he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest due to a parole violation for an earlier release. Because of this, immediately after he was discharged, he was taken directly to prison. Once there, Anthony complained of headaches and slurred speech multiple times, but despite the fact that he'd suffered that recent traumatic attack, he was not referred for another brain scan. It wasn't until August 29th that he received medical attention, after he suffered a seizure in his cell. By that point, it was too late though. After being taken to a hospital, he was never able to recover, and he died from complications from his original injuries about 2 weeks later. Authorities later admitted there were, quote, "some missed opportunities for medical intervention," but maintained that Anthony never would have died if he hadn't been attacked in the first place. And while that's obviously true, at least personally, it's hard not to feel like he was failed here. In a way, I think that's what I find so haunting about this case. Anthony's killers treated his death like a joke, but arguably, they weren't the only ones that failed to take his situation seriously. And that makes this tragedy all the more senseless. The summer of 2024 was an exciting time for Swedish teenager Emilia Sjöberg. After several difficult years, it seemed like things were finally settling down, and for once, she was looking forward to having some much-needed stability in her life. At the age of just 14 years old, Emilia had already experienced more challenges than many adults. The exact circumstances are a bit fuzzy here, but what we do know is that Emilia's mother Anna had her when she was only 19. Anna was also on her own, and though she'd done her best to raise Emilia, she'd often struggled. Some sources state that she'd been in and out of several abusive relationships, and as a result of this, among other issues, from the time Emilia was about 5 years old, she'd mainly lived in state-run foster homes. From the sounds of it, Emilia had a rough time in foster care. She was seen as soft by a lot of the other kids in the homes where she grew up, and this made her an easy target for bullies. It also meant that she didn't have a lot of friends her own age. Despite this, miraculously, Emilia had grown into a kind-hearted and compassionate young woman. Instead of dwelling on the tough hand she had been dealt in life, she was constantly thinking about others, and would do things like give clothes and money away to the homeless, even though she herself often had very little. According to those that knew her, she was trusting, and more than anything, she had a strong belief in the goodness of other people. Well, that summer, it seemed like karma was finally paying Emilia back. Her mother, Anna, had just moved into a new home in the small municipality of Tollarp, and in early July, Emilia learned that she was going to be allowed to live with her again, at least temporarily. All of this was very recent. Emilia had only moved back in with her mom less than 2 weeks ago at this point, but already they'd been very busy. They'd spent the last few days shopping together, hanging out, and just generally making up for lost time. Something that they'd especially enjoyed doing was ordering furniture for Emilia's new bedroom. For the first time in what felt like forever, she had her own space, and Anna wanted her to be able to decorate it however she liked. This fresh start wasn't the only thing that Emilia was looking forward to, though. You see, something else unexpected had recently happened to her as well. Emilia had been contacted by a 15-year-old girl she knew from her time in foster care, named Milak, and Milak had invited her to a pajama party. Just in case you're like me and you've never heard the term pajama party before, from what I understand, this is basically what we would call a slumber party or a sleepover in North America. Anyway, Emilia didn't know the girl who was actually hosting the pajama party, but Milak told her that that was totally fine. She said that another girl that had been with them in foster care, a 13-year-old named Rafaela, was also going, so it wasn't like she wasn't going to know anyone there. Now, Emilia was surprised to get this invitation. She, Milak, and Rafaela had spent quite a bit of time together in foster care, but they hadn't always gotten along. All the same, this was a big deal for Emilia. She had never been to anything like this before, and she was just really happy to be included. In fact, she was so excited, she immediately packed her overnight bag with clothes, some bedding, and anything else she thought she'd need. In true Emilia fashion, she also brought a gift card with her that she'd received for her birthday, which she planned to share with her friends. There was one issue that Emilia was kind of concerned about, though. The party was in the town of Landskrona, which was a good distance away. Milak had agreed to meet her at the local railway station once she got there, but the journey still required Emilia to take a bus and 2 trains, and she was a bit nervous about messing up the route. When the time came for Emilia to leave on the afternoon of July 22nd, this caused some tension between her and her mom. They ended up getting in a minor argument, but Emilia was quick to apologize. After actually starting her trip, she was able to find her way and spoke to Anna several times on the phone. She also sent her a text apologizing, one that read, quote, "Sorry, Mum, for behaving badly because I was stressed. I love you, and you are my life." The text was accompanied by a selfie video Emilia had taken, giving her mom a look at the makeup and fake nails she'd put on during her train ride. Anna quickly posted the video to her own Instagram story, captioning it, quote, "My beautiful," on her way to her first pajama party. This video was never intended to be anything more than a small memento, a happy memory in what should have been many more milestones to come. Sadly, though, that's not what happened. Instead, this short clip would become a reminder of a night to remember for all the wrong reasons. The following day, so July 23rd, a couple of police officers in the town of Landskrona made a horrifying discovery. While patrolling near a local industrial area, they came across the body of a young woman. I should point out that Swedish media sources appear to contradict each other about exactly when this happened. Some reports state that it was late on the evening of July 23rd, while others claim it was just after midnight, so mere hours after that video Emilia recorded. What we do know, though, is that the scene those officers stumbled across was incredibly disturbing. What we also know as they were soon able to determine that this was likely the body of Emilia Sjöberg. Emilia was lying on her stomach, partially hidden on the grounds of an old railway yard. Her hands and feet were bound with silver duct tape, with more tape being found wrapped around her neck, mouth, and part of her nose. The most jarring part, though, was Emilia's injuries. She had suffered nearly 36 stab wounds, among other signs of brutal violence. Most of the wounds were to her torso and legs, but the ones that had actually killed her were the knife injuries to her neck. Emilia's identity wasn't officially confirmed for several days, but that changed when her overnight bag was found. It was recovered from the sea, not far from where her body was found. Inside was Emilia's bank card, along with most of the belongings she'd packed for the Pyjama Party. Speaking of the Pyjama Party, the crime was quickly linked back to Emilia's so-called friends, Milak and Rafaela. The 15-year-old and 13-year-old were arrested on July 24th and 25th, respectively, and once in custody, it didn't take long for them to start talking. The girls initially tried to minimize what had happened, telling investigators that Emilia's death was simply the result of a fight that had gotten out of hand. In the beginning, it seems even police wondered if this was the case. Maybe Milak and Rafaela were just jealous that Emilia had been able to go and live with her mom. However, as they continued investigating and pressed the two teens for more information, a far darker picture emerged. Over the course of several conversations, Milak and Rafaela admitted that there never was any party. Instead, they had deliberately lured Emilia into a trap. This is what they confessed had happened next. When Emilia arrived in Landskrona on July 22nd, Milak met her at the local train station, just as they had planned. But instead of going to the place where they were supposed to be staying, Milak walked Emilia to that old railway yard, telling her that a boy Emilia liked was going to meet them there. After heading into the railway yard, the two of them walked between two abandoned train cars, where Milak suddenly coughed twice. This was a signal to alert Rafaela, who emerged wearing a homemade mask and carrying a knife. Even at this point, Emilia apparently didn't take the girls seriously. She recognized Rafaela immediately, and believing this was a dumb joke, went to hug her. That's when the two teens attacked. By the time Emilia realized just how much danger she was in, sadly, it was too late. Milak and Rafaela wrestled her to the ground, then began beating her and binding her with duct tape. Once Emilia was restrained, the girls took turns sitting on top of her and stabbing her, while the other burned her with a lighter. When it was over, the girls left Emilia's body, but took her bag of belongings and threw it in the ocean. As unimaginably awful as that already is, unfortunately, it gets worse. Because Milak and Rafaela hadn't just carried out this heinous crime. They also filmed parts of it and shared those videos with other people. When detectives went through their phones, they discovered they were part of a group chat with at least 4 other people in it. People who seemed to know what was going to happen to Emilia beforehand and had actively encouraged the violence. Also found on one of the girls' phones was at least 3 deeply unsettling gore videos. Videos which Rafaela admitted that she and Milak watched on their way to commit the murder, both to hype them up and to serve as inspiration for what they were about to do. Despite being the younger of the two, it seems Rafaela was actually the primary aggressor in the case, and some of the things she said during her interviews with police were beyond chilling. For instance, when asked if she had any remorse for what she'd done, Rafaela reportedly replied, quote, "Sometimes I think I should." That being said, it appears even she had trouble articulating exactly why she did what she did. The closest authorities ever got to a motive were 2 different and equally senseless explanations. The first was that the killing had to do with jealousy over a boy. The second was that Emilia had once insulted a friend or family member of Rafaela's during their time in foster care together, and that she had never been able to let go of this grudge. Likewise, Rafaela didn't have any clear explanation for her actions after the murder. For instance, her phone records revealed that she'd called Emilia's phone 12 times on July 23rd, hours after she was already dead. She'd also texted her, quote, "Rest in peace, my sweetie. I love you. I'm so proud of you. The only thing resembling a reason Rafaela was able to give to police was that she still wanted to talk to Emilia even though she was dead. Still, if there were any remaining doubts that this whole thing was premeditated, those went away as authorities continued to uncover more evidence. This included surveillance footage taken from local stores showing Rafaela and Milak stealing the tape and knives used in the crime before the attack. Additional CCTV footage also showed the teens walking hand in hand just a short time after the killing, as if nothing had happened. As I'm sure you can understand, the news of Emilia's murder shocked people across Sweden, not just because of the brutality, but because of the ages of the two girls responsible. Of course, no one was as devastated, though, as Emilia's mother, Anna. In an interview just days after all of this happened, Anna told local media, quote, "I cannot accept that she is dead. We are in shock. At home, I just sit and wait for Emilia to show up. Every time the phone rings, I answer in a panic. I think Emilia is calling now and wants to say she's really late and apologize like she usually does." Anna also spoke about how her daughter's death was especially cruel, considering how her killers had taken advantage of her kind and trusting nature. She told reporters, quote, "She wanted to save the world, but no one saved her when she was suffering." In late February of 2025, a district court found that both Milak and Rafaela were guilty of murder and robbery. But because of their ages at the time of the killing, authorities were limited in what they could actually do. Milak was sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in a closed juvenile care home, while Rafaela could not be sentenced at all due to the fact that she was below Sweden's age of criminal responsibility. As for those other people in the group chat with Milak and Rafaela, it seems none of them were ever convicted of a crime. Even after some of the videos were circulated online, and some truly sick individuals reportedly decided to harass Emilia's mother by sending them to her. The whole thing sparked renewed debate in Sweden over how cases like this should be handled. According to media reports, the country is currently working to lower the age of criminal responsibility to 13, though it seems this has more to do with Sweden's ongoing problems with children being recruited by criminal gangs. As far as the issue of punishment goes, Anna said that she considered her daughter's killers to be monsters, but that their sentences were not her primary concern. Even before the trial, she told reporters, quote, "I live in hell. I won't get Emilia back, even if they are convicted. I don't really care who did it or what punishment they get, because Emilia is already gone. With a daughter looking down on me, I can't go around punishing these people, because then Emilia would have been ashamed of me." Instead, Anna said her focus was on honoring Emilia's memory. In interviews at the time, she heartbreakingly discussed how she planned on going ahead and finishing her bedroom, observing, quote, "Maybe it's a grieving process. We had a plan for how the room would be decorated, and I can't just mess with that plan. I will set it up anyway and close the door to her room. I want it to stay. I don't want to forget her." Just a heads up, this last story is on the shorter side because it's actually still making its way through the court system. That being said, we decided to cover it both because it definitely fits today's theme and because, as far as we can tell, shockingly little has so far been published about the case online. At 7:37 a.m. on November 9th, 2025, this image was uploaded to Facebook. It was added by a 31-year-old Florida man named Leosby Cuesta de Armas. Now, the picture itself is innocent enough. It shows Leosby at the beach with his former girlfriend, 39-year-old Zenaida Alvarez. The picture had only been taken a few months earlier, in mid-April, and judging by the light and celebratory comments, few of Leosby's friends seemed to know that he and Zenaida were no longer together. Sadly, though, that wasn't all they weren't aware of. You see, at the time this photo was posted, Zenaida was no longer alive, and she hadn't been for nearly 13 hours. The previous day, Saturday, November 8th, Zenaida had traveled to a home on Lake Avenue in the community of Lehigh Acres. She was there to visit a close female friend of hers and had brought along her 2 daughters. The group had planned to spend the afternoon together putting up Christmas decorations and having a bit of holiday fun. However, all of that would come to a sudden and tragic end early that evening. As the Lee County Sheriff's Office would later allege, after their recent breakup, Leosby had been stalking Zenaida, and that day he had followed her to her friend's place. He had previously been to the residence when they were still dating, and while it's not exactly clear how, he reportedly used his prior knowledge of the property to secretly break inside. For approximately 2 hours, Leosby remained hidden in the residence until Zenaida's friend went to grab something from her pantry. For a second, she thought the door was stuck, until while trying to pull it open, she noticed a figure standing inside. She would later tell police she started screaming when she realized it was Leosby glaring at her through a small opening in the door and holding a knife. Before the woman could do anything, though, Leosby had rushed past her. He proceeded to run right for Zenaida, after which he allegedly began stabbing her repeatedly in the chest with the knife. The horrific attack reportedly continued even after Zenaida had collapsed to the floor. It was only after she stopped moving completely that Leosby apparently ran from the home without ever saying a word. Zenaida's terrified friend immediately called 911, but sadly, there was nothing anyone could do. By the time emergency responders arrived, Zenaida was dead, and Leosby had fled the scene. Police weren't able to catch up with Leosby until the following day, after an alert was put out for his black 2024 Dodge pickup truck. By that time, he was about 75 miles away in Hardy County. When officers approached Leosby's truck, he took off, leading them on a high-speed chase through several communities and into Polk County. The pursuit only ended after Leosby struck a patrol vehicle before crashing head-on into a light pole. It wasn't until Leosby's arrest that authorities noticed that picture he'd posted of himself and Zenaida earlier that morning, which he'd set as the cover photo for his Facebook profile. It's still unclear why he did this, though it's possible he somehow thought it would make him look less guilty. Of course, at the time of this recording, Leosby has not been found guilty of any crime. In fact, according to reports, he had no prior criminal record before all of this. However, he is now facing charges of first-degree murder and first-degree burglary while armed, as well as several offenses related to the police pursuit. Hopefully, as the case continues to move forward, we'll get some more insights about exactly what happened here, as well as more details about Zenaida Alvarez and her life. Until then, this photo serves as a haunting reminder of how even seemingly happy moments can hide incredibly dark secrets. Hey there. Before you take off, we'd just like to take a second and say that we really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Luke and I are so grateful for our incredible Crime Zone community, so thank you for being a part of it. If you want to help Crime Zone continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to support the channel, there are a couple of options. We've got a thriving community over on Patreon, where you can get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. Head over to patreon.com/crimezone to learn more and to meet some of the awesome people whose names are currently on screen. If that isn't your thing, we've also now launched channel memberships so you can join directly here on YouTube. Channel members get a lot of the same perks as on Patreon, including extra content, without the added hassle of having to go off-platform. Now, that being said, we know times are tough and that not everyone is able to support financially. Regardless of your situation, though, we want you to know that we truly appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, and we hope to see you soon.